Hello, I'm Buddy Provencio. Who's your buddy? So, I am doing some homework right now. I need to think about economics in East Asia during, like, the post World War II kind of stuff, right? And so I started kind of reading one of my rare books that I have. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named Durant. He's my favorite historian. So I have this book right here. The little book. I also have, as you can see kind of up over my shoulder there, you can see my set of Durant's up there too. Those are his Story of Civilization set. Well, this book right here is called The Lessons of History. Right? And I got it when I ordered my book set. Well, this particular book happens to be signed by Durant. See, Durant died in the 70s, and this was his last book. It was published in 1968. Well, not his last book, almost his last book. But see, signature right there. And he's underlined, this happens to be his book. He's underlined his favorite passages and so on and so forth. Well, I was reading this section called Economics and History. And I decided to, why not, do a YouTube video and read economics and history to you guys. Why not, right? Everything else is on the internet. And so this book, it goes through all kinds of different steps. I'll go ahead and read off the different chapters. I'll probably eventually do all of them, because this is a very profound book. Every single chapter has blown my mind. So chapter 1 is hesitations. Then history and the earth, biology and history, race and history. And by the way, a lot of people are afraid to talk about this stuff these days. It's, of course, it's an old book, and he has his own theories, so bear with me. Character and history, morals and history, religion and history, economics and history, socialism and history, government and history, history and war, growth and decay, and is progress real? Interesting, right? And like I said, Durant is a special kind of historian. He has studied all of history from the beginning to end, when he died anyway. So, he was going to do a history of the Americas, but he never quite got to that before he passed away. Him and his wife did a lot of the writing about it. So, anyways, like I said, I wanted to read economics and history. And this, like I said, this is going to go a little bit out of, order. But it's very interesting. And I think, the world might enjoy it. So, and this is his book. So, his personal book. History, according to Karl Marx, is economics in action. The contest among individuals, groups, classes, and states for food, fuel, materials, and economic power. Political forms, religious institutions, cultural creations are all rooted in economic realities. So the Industrial Revolution brought with it democracy, feminism, birth control, and socialism. Socialism, the decay of religion, the loosening of morals, the liberation of literature from dependence upon aristocratic patronage, the replacement of romanticism by realism in fiction, and the economic interpretation of history. The outstanding personalities in these movements were effects, not causes. Agamemnon, Achilles, and Hector would never have been heard had not the Greeks sought commercial control of the Dardanelles' economic ambition. Not the face of Helen, fairer than the evening air clad in the beauty of the thousand stars, launching 1,000 ships on Ilium, those subtle Greeks knew how to cover naked economic truth with the fig leaf of a phase. Unquestionably, the economic interpretation illuminates much history. The money of the Delaney Confederation built the Parthenon. The treasury of Cleopatra's Egypt revitalized the exhausted Italy of Augustus, gave Virgil an annuity and Horace a farm. The Crusades, like the wars of Rome with Persia, were attempts of the West to capture trade routes to the East. The discovery of America was the result of failure of the Crusades. The bank house of the Medici financed the Florentine Renaissance. The trade and industry of Nuremberg made Dürer possible. The French Revolution came not because Voltaire wrote brilliant satires and Rousseau sentimental romances, but because the middle classes had risen to economic leadership, needed legislative freedom for their enterprise and trade, and itched for social acceptance and political power. Marx did not claim that individuals were always actuated by economic interest. He was far from imagining the material considerations led by Abelard's romance, or the Gospel of Buddha, or the poems of the Keats. But perhaps he underestimated the role played by non-economic incentives in the behavior of masses by religious fervor, as in the Muslim or Spanish armies, by nationalistic ardor, as in Hitler's troops or Japan's kamikazes, by the self-fertilizing fury of mobs, as in Gordon's riots of June 2nd through 8th. 1780 in London, or the massacres of September 2nd through 7th, 1792 in Paris. In such cases, the motives of the usually hidden leaders may be economic, but the result is largely determined by the passions of the mass. In many instances, political or military power was apparently the cause rather than the result of economic operations, as the seizure of Russia by the Bolsheviks in 1917, or the army coups that punctuate South American history, or who would claim the Moorish conquest of Spain, or the Mongol conquest of Western Asia, or the Mongol conquest of India, was the product of economic power? In these cases, the poor proved stronger than the rich. Military victory gave a political ascendancy which brought economic control. The generals could write a military interpretation of history. Allowing for these cautions, we may derive endless instruction. From the economic analysis of the past, we observe that the invading barbarians of Rome found Rome weak because the agricultural population, which had formerly supplied the legions with hardy and patriotic warriors fighting for the land, had been replaced by slaves laboring listlessly on vast farms owned by one man or a few. Today, the inability of small farms to use the best machinery profitability is again forcing agriculture into large-scale production under capitalist or communistic ownership. It was once said that civilization is a parasite on the man with the hoe. But the man with the hoe no longer exists. He is now a hand at the wheel of a tractor or a combine. Agriculture becomes an industry, and soon the farmer must choose between being an employee of a capitalist and being an employee of a state. At the other end of the scale, history reports that the men who can manage manage the men who can manage only things, and the man who can manage money manage all. So the bankers watching the trends in agriculture, industry, and trade, inviting the directing the flow of the capital, putting our money doubtfully and trebly to work, controlling loans and interest and enterprise, running great risks to make great gains. Rise to the top of the economic pyramid from the Medici of Florence and the Fuggers of Augsburg to the Rothschilds of Paris and London and the Morgans of New York. Bankers have sat in the councils of governments, financing wars and popes, and occasionally sparking a revolution. Perhaps it is one secret of their power that, having studied the fluctuations of prices, they know that history is inflationary, and that money is the last thing a wise man will hoard. Ooh. See, told you, deep. The experience of the past leaves little doubt that every economic system must sooner or later rely upon some form of the profit motive to stir individuals and groups to productivity. Substitutes like slavery, police supervision, or ideological euphemism prove too unproductive, too expensive, or too transient. Normal and generally, people are judged by their ability to produce, except in war, when they are ranked according to the ability to destroy. Since practical ability differs from person to person, the majority of such abilities in nearly all societies is gathered in the minority of the men. The concentration of wealth is a natural result of this concentration of ability, and regularly reoccurs in history. The rate of concentration varies, the other factors being equal, with the economic freedom permitted by morals and the laws. Despotism may for a time retard the concentration democracy, allowing the most liberty accelerates it. The relative equality of Americans before 1776 has been overwhelmed by 1,000 forms of physical, mental, and economic differentiation, so that the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest is now greater than any time since imperial plutocratic Rome. In progressive societies, the concentration may reach a point where the strength of the number in the many poor rivals and strength of the ability of the few rich, then the unstable equilibrium generates a critical situation which history has diversely met by legislation redistributing wealth or by revolution distributing poverty. See? Told you. Nobody writes like this anymore. Sorry, it's long, huh? In the Athens of 594 BC, according to Plutarch, the disparity of fortune between the rich and the poor has reached its height, so that the city seemed to be in a dangerous condition and no other means for freeing it from disturbances seemed possible but despotic power. The poor, finding their status worsen each year, the government in the hands of its masters, and the corrupt courts deciding every issue against them, began to talk of violent revolt. The rich, angry at the challenge of their property, prepared to defend themselves by force. Good sense prevailed. Moderate elements secured the election of the Solon, a businessman of aristocratic lineage, to the supreme archonship. He devalued the currency, thereby easing the burden of all debtors, though he himself was a creditor. He reduced all personal debts and ended imprisonment for debt. He canceled arrears for taxes and mortgage interest. He established a gratuitous income tax that made the rich pay at a rate 12 times that required of the poor. He reorganized the courts on more popular basis. He arranged that the sons of those who had died from war in Athens should be brought up and educated at the government's expense. The rich protested that his measures were outright confiscation. The radicals complained that he had not redivided the land, but within a generation almost all agreed that his reforms had saved Athens from revolution. The Roman Senate, so famous for its wisdom, adopted the uncompromising course when the concentration of wealth approached an explosive point in Italy. The result was 100 years of class and civil war. Tiberius Gracchus, an aristocrat elected in the tribune of the people, proposed to redistribute land by limiting ownership to 333 acres per person, that and allotted surplus land to the restive proliferate of the capital. The Senate rejected his proposals as confiscatory. He appealed to the people, telling them, "You fight and die to give wealth and luxury to others. You are called the masters of the world, but there is not a foot of the ground that you can call your own. Contrary to the Roman law, he campaigned for re-election as tribune. In an election day riot, he was slain in 133 BC. His brother Caius, taking up his cause, failed to prevent the renewal of violence and ordered his servant to kill him. The slave obeyed and then killed himself. 3,000 of Caius' followers were put to death as a senatorial decree. Marius became the leader of the plebs, but withdrew when the movement verged on revolution. Catiline, proposing to abolish all debts, organized a revolutionary army of wretched paupers. He was inundated by Cicero's angry eloquence and died in battle against the state. Julius Caesar attempted to compromise, but was cut down by the patricians. After 5 years of civil war, Mark Antony confused his support of Caesar's policies with the personal ambitions and romance. Octavius defeated him at Actium, and established the Principate, that for 210 years, 30 BC to 180 AD, or CE, as we call it today, like I said, this is an old book, remained the Pax Romana between the classes as well as among the states within the imperial frontiers. After the breakdown of political order in the Western Roman Empire, centuries of destitution were followed by the slow renewal and the reconcentration of wealth, partly in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. In one respect, the Reformation was the redistribution of wealth by the reduction of German and English payments to the Roman Church, by the secular appropriation of ecclesiastical property and revenues. The French Revolution attempted a violent redistribution of wealth by the Jacqueries. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, please forgive me. Jacqueries in the countryside and massacres in the city. But the chief result was the transfer of property and privilege from the aristocracy to the bourgeoisie. The government of the United States in 1933 to 52 and 1960 to 65 followed Solon's peaceful methods and accomplished a moderate and pacifying redistribution. Perhaps someone had studied history. The upper classes in America cursed, complied, and resumed the concentration of wealth. We conclude that the concentration of wealth is natural and inevitable, and is periodically alleviated by violence or peaceful partial redistribution. In this view, all economic history is the slow heartbeat of the social organism, a vast systole and diastole of concentrating wealth and compulsive recirculation. And that's economics and history. And now it goes on to socialism and history. Dun, dun, dun! So I just thought that I wanted to share that with everybody on here. Like I said, this is my first YouTube video I've ever really made. I made a couple of them for school, but that's about it. And I just figured, what the heck? Why not? I love this book. It's an amazing book. Just like I said, the points that he had in that book are spot on. They're spot on. And just like he talks about at the end there, the concentration of wealth is inevitable. It's inevitable. Just like they always say, the cream always rises to the top, right? The ambitious, just like he talks about ancient Rome a lot. Same thing with ancient Rome. I mean, ancient Rome had a system in place to where it promoted ambition, to where it promoted you to be better. Every person in their house had a ancestors room, which they venerated, and they'd go in there and they'd see the accomplishments of their ancestors, and they would hope to be better than their ancestors, which drove ambition. And it's really cool how he puts it, and he puts today's frame of mind into it, and that is the coolest thing, because it still matters today. This was written in 1968, and it was so relevant then. Like, it's only got worse. The way the system works, the way everything. He talks about the Rothschilds of England. I mean, look where we're at. So I don't know. I just think it's really cool. I will do more videos, so like and subscribe. Let's do it. You know, why not? I'll do a couple more chapters, and I don't know, maybe start messing around with this YouTube thing. You never know. Might work, might not. Might just have some fun recording random stuff. You know, maybe I'll get on when I'm drinking sometime and have some real fun. Well, thank you very much, guys. I'm going to end this at just